I've worn the badge for over 20 years. In that time, I've seen things most people only read about in the papers, or watch in movies they think are exaggerated. But the truth, reality is far darker, far stranger, and far heavier than most of those stories. I don't scare easily. I can walk into a bar fight and split up 3 drunk guys twice my size. I can pull over a car at 2 in the morning, not knowing if the driver has a gun tucked under the seat. That comes with the job. Fear is something you learn to put in your pocket. But every cop has a case that clings to them, that doesn't stay filed away in some dusty cabinet. A case that sticks in the back of your head, in your dreams, and in the hollow, quiet moments when you're alone. This is mine. I've told this story only once before, off the record, late at night over a drink with another officer who had his own ghosts. And I remember the way he looked at me, half disbelief, half pity, because even though he'd seen plenty, he could tell this case had dug its claws into me. I wasn't just a cop when it happened. I was a father. I was a husband. And I was a man who thought he could separate his job from his life. After this case, I learned you can't. Some things follow you home. It started on a rainy Thursday night. I remember because the rain came down so hard. It bounced off the asphalt in silver bursts, and the wipers on my cruiser could barely keep up. Dispatch came through with a call that seemed routine. Unit 42. Check on a possible disturbance. 911 call cut out. Location, 1139 Alder Street. Caller did not identify themselves. Now, you get calls like that more often than you'd think. Most of the time it's a prank, or someone drunk who hangs up. You show up, knock on the door. Everyone pretends nothing happened, and you move on. But Alder Street was different. Alder wasn't a dangerous neighborhood, not exactly, but it was old. Cracked sidewalks, sagging porches, houses that looked like they were holding their breath, waiting for someone to either renovate them or finally let them collapse. When I pulled onto the block, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the whole street glistened under the orange glow of the streetlights. My headlights cut across the row of houses, and when they hit 1139, something in my gut tightened. It was the kind of house you just feel. The windows were dark, curtains drawn tight, paint peeled from the siding in long strips, like skin after a sunburn, and the porch light flickered, casting a nervous glow across the yard. I radioed in, Unit 42, 10 to 23 Alder. As I stepped out of the car, the air hit me, damp, heavy, thick in a way that made you swallow twice, like it didn't want to go down. I told myself it was just a storm, just the night. I walked up to the porch, boots heavy on the wood. Knocked once, twice. Police. Anyone home? Silence. I tried the knob. To my surprise, it turned. Unlocked. Now, training tells you 2 things in that situation. 1, you don't enter without backup unless there's an immediate threat to life. 2, if you do enter, you announce yourself loud and clear. So I called it in. Dispatch, door is unlocked, proceeding with caution, requesting backup. I waited, listened. The only sound was the rain ticking off the gutters. Then, from inside the house, just faint enough I thought I imagined it, I heard something. A voice. Not clear words. Just a low, dragging sound, like someone trying to talk through a mouthful of water. I drew my flashlight, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Stale, damp, with a sharp undertone of something metallic. Not blood exactly, but close enough to trigger the instinct. The living room was small, crowded with mismatched furniture. A sofa slumped in the corner, cushions torn open. A TV sat on a milk crate. The walls were yellowed with age and smoke. I panned the flashlight slowly, my free hand hovering near my sidearm. Police. I called again, louder this time. Is anyone here? No answer. I took a step forward, the floorboards groaning under my weight. That's when I noticed the pictures on the wall. Family portraits, but they didn't look right. The faces were blurred, not from age, but like the camera itself had trembled. Every person in the frame seemed just out of focus, their features warped. And in every photo, the same thing. No one was smiling, not even the kids. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, and that's when I heard it again. The voice, this time clearer, coming from the hallway. It sounded like a whisper pulled too thin. Help! That was enough for me to move. I stepped carefully, flashlight cutting through the dark as I followed the sound down the hall. The carpet was damp under my boots, like it had absorbed years of spills and storms. Halfway down, I passed a bedroom door cracked open. My light slid across it and landed on something that made me stop cold. A hand, small, pale, just visible through the gap, lying on the floor. I pushed the door open with my foot, flashlight sweeping inside. The room was bare except for a mattress on the floor. And there, curled up against it, was a boy. Couldn't have been older than 9 or 10. His skin was ashen, his eyes wide, pupils blown so big they almost swallowed the color. He was trembling, whispering the same word over and over. Help! 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 I crouched low, tried to soften my voice. It's okay, buddy. I'm with the police. You're safe now. But when I reached out my hand, he recoiled like I'd burned him. His head snapped to the side, eyes darting to the shadowed corner of the room. And that's when I saw it. For just a second, before the beam of my flashlight shifted. A shape, tall, thin, standing too close to the wall, as if it was trying to flatten itself into the shadows. My breath caught. I whipped the light back, but the corner was empty. Nothing but peeling wallpaper. But the boy's eyes stayed locked there, wide and wet, his whispers growing frantic. Don't let it take me. Don't let it take me. My heart was pounding so loud, I almost didn't hear the creak of the front door behind me. Backup hadn't arrived yet. Someone, or something, else was in the house. And in that moment, kneeling in that rotting bedroom with a terrified child, clinging to life by nothing but whispers, I realized this wasn't going to be another routine call. This was the start of the case that would ruin me. The case that would haunt me for the rest of my life. When backup finally arrived, I was still kneeling on the floor with the boy. His body was trembling so hard that I could feel the vibrations through the air, like he was vibrating from the inside out. 2 uniforms stepped in, boots echoing through the hallway. "What do we got, Sarge?" one of them asked. I didn't look at them right away. My eyes stayed on the boy, on those pupils blown wide like he'd stared into a void no kid should ever see. Possible neglect. Trauma. I muttered, my voice rough. "We need paramedics." The younger officer radioed it, and while the other tried to help me coax the boy out of the corner. But he wouldn't move. His whispers kept repeating, breaking up like a record that skipped. "Don't let it take me. Don't let it take me. Don't let it." Every time he reached that last word, his voice cut off like his throat closed, like something was cutting him off. One of the officers crouched down, his tone softer than I'd ever heard from him. "Hey kid, we're here to help. You're safe." But the boy's eyes darted over his shoulder again, to that empty corner, and for just half a second, I thought I saw the wallpaper shift, like someone pressed against it from the other side, stretching the surface before melting back into it. I blinked and it was gone. Paramedics took the boy out, bundled him in a blanket, loaded him into the ambulance. He didn't resist, didn't speak again either, just clutched that blanket like it was the last thing tethering him to earth. When they left, I stayed behind. Something about that house felt unfinished. The uniforms were ready to clear, chalk it up as child in distress. But the smell lingered in my nose, that metallic tang that never belonged in a normal home. And there was something about those family portraits on the wall. I walked back into the living room. The officers were already halfway down the porch steps, talking about grabbing coffee. My flashlight beam hit the nearest frame, the one hanging crooked above the sofa. I leaned in. It wasn't just the faces that were blurred. It was the background. All of them. Christmas mornings, birthdays, family trips. Each picture looked warped, like the world behind them had been stretched. Corners bent too sharply, shadows too dark, and in the far background of each one, no matter where the picture had been taken, there was a shape. Tall, thin, always just out of focus. Watching, I felt my throat tighten. When I pulled back, I nearly tripped over something wedged under the sofa. A notebook. Its cover was torn leather, pages yellowed. My glove squeaked as I flipped it open. Inside, Page after page of scrawled handwriting, some in frantic loops, others precise and neat, all saying the same thing. It comes at night. It waits in the corners. Don't let it take the children. By the time I got back to the precinct, my uniform was soaked through. Not from rain, from sweat. They asked me what happened in the house, why I looked like I had aged 10 years in a night. I told them what they wanted to hear. Kid found in bad shape. Possible abuse situation. Following up. I didn't mention the shifting wallpaper. I didn't mention the notebook. I didn't mention the photos that all had the same shadowed figure. Because how could I? You start talking like that, and you don't just lose credibility. You lose your badge. But the images stuck in my mind, burned into the back of my eyelids. That night, I went home, kissed my wife on the cheek, and checked on my daughter in her room. She was asleep, tangled in blankets, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight to her chest. For the first time in years, I shut her window, pulled the curtains, and sat in the hallway until my eyes grew too heavy. The next morning, I went back to Alder Street. Officially, it was to follow up. Unofficially, it was because I couldn't shake the feeling that the house still had something in it. The rain had stopped, but the street looked no brighter. The house was taped off, waiting for Child Protective Services to make a call. I stepped inside. The air was worse. Still damp, still metallic, but now it smelled almost sweet, like rot hidden under sugar. I moved through the living room, down the hall, into the same bedroom where I'd found the boy. Empty mattress, peeling wallpaper, but on the wall above the bed, I saw something new. Carved into the plaster. Not written, not drawn. Carved. For words. You can't stop it. My flashlight trembled in my hand. I snapped photos, documented it. Tried to tell myself some angry parent had done it long before we arrived. But the grooves in the plaster looked fresh. Too fresh. I stepped closer, and that's when I noticed something at the baseboard. A fingernail. Broken. Pressed deep into the carpet like someone had clawed it free while scratching those words into the wall. My stomach turned. I drove back to the station and pulled every record we had on that address. Property records, incident reports, old 911 calls. And what I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 20 years, there had been at least 7 calls to that house. Disturbances, domestic disputes, missing persons. But every single time, the report ended the same way. No evidence found. Case closed. Like the house itself swallowed everything before the paperwork could stick. I dug deeper, pulled archived newspapers. A pattern started to form. Families moved in. Within a year, at least one child would die, disappear, or be institutionalized after episodes. Neighbors always said the same thing. They heard whispers at night. And always, those cases just faded. No follow-up, no press. Like someone, or something, wanted them forgotten. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my study. The notebook from under the sofa spread across my desk. The entries grew darker the further I read. It doesn't just want them. It wants witnesses. The more you see it, the closer it gets. The handwriting changed near the end. Letters stretched long, words broken across lines. I can't fight it anymore. It's inside the walls. It's inside the children. And the last page, just 3 words scribbled over and over until the paper tore. IT took her. The next morning, my daughter wouldn't eat her cereal. She sat at the table, spoon limp in her hand, staring at the corner of the kitchen. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "what are you looking at?" She didn't blink, didn't look away. Finally, she whispered, "Daddy, don't let it take me." The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered against the bowl. Because in that moment I knew, this wasn't just a case anymore. It had followed me home. I didn't tell my wife what our daughter said. How could I? What words could I string together that wouldn't sound insane? But inside I was unraveling. That day at the station, I found myself staring at every shadow. Every corner of the squad room looked darker than it should. The flicker of the fluorescent lights felt like warning signals. And worst of all, every time my phone rang, I expected it to be another call from Alder Street. But it wasn't Alder Street. It was worse. 2 nights later, the boy's caseworker called. "Detective." Her voice was tight, trembling. "You should come see this for yourself." I met her at the hospital psych ward. She led me down a sterile hallway that reeked of bleach and resignation. At the end, behind reinforced glass, the boy sat strapped to a bed. His eyes were wide open, not blinking, not sleeping, and the skin under those eyes blackened, like bruises, but too precise, too symmetrical. The caseworker whispered, "He hasn't closed his eyes in 48 hours. The doctors sedated him twice. He fought it both times. He keeps saying the same thing." I stepped closer to the glass. "What's he saying?" Right then, the boy's lips moved. Soundless, but I could read the words. It followed him home. My stomach sank, because I knew exactly who him was. That night, I got home late. My wife was asleep. The house was too quiet, every tick of the clock echoing like a gunshot. I checked on my daughter. She was sleeping, but her tiny hand clutched the edge of the blanket like she was bracing against being pulled away. I sat on the floor of her room for hours, listening, and then I heard it. A scrape. Not from her room, from mine. I crept back down the hallway, heart slamming against my ribs. The scrape grew louder, slower. When I opened the bedroom door, my blood ran cold. Across the mirror above the dresser, a message was scrawled in condensation, as though from a breath too foul to belong to anything living. "She's next." I staggered back, bowel rising in my throat. I grabbed a towel, wiped the mirror clean, desperate to erase it before my wife could see. But as soon as I stepped back, the letters formed again. This time darker, thicker. "You're too late." I didn't sleep at all. I sat at the kitchen table, my service pistol on the wood, staring at the doorway like I was guarding against an intruder I couldn't explain. And as the hours dragged on, one thought ate at me. If this thing wanted my daughter, then there was nothing in the handbook, nothing in the academy, nothing in years of homicide investigations that could prepare me for how to stop it. The next morning, I drove to Alvarez's house. Alvarez was an old-timer in the department, the kind of guy who'd seen enough bodies to stop blinking at crime scenes. If anyone had heard whispers of cases like mine, it'd be him. But when I pulled up to his place, something was wrong. The blinds were drawn. The lawn was overgrown. Newspapers piled up on the porch. I knocked. No answer. I forced the door. Inside smelled like rotten mildew. Dust clung to the air, and on the living room wall, in jagged black strokes, were the same 4 words I'd seen carved above the boy's bed. "You can't stop it." I called it in, but even as backup was dispatched, I moved deeper inside. The kitchen table was covered in files, old case folders, yellowed newspaper clippings, photographs. Every one of them linked back to Alder Street. Different families, different decades, always the same end. One clipping stopped me cold. "Child found dead in Alder Street home. Police baffled." The photo showed a little girl. Same wide eyes, same slack mouth. The article quoted neighbors saying she'd whispered about the man in the corner. And right there, scrawled across the clipping in red ink, Alvarez had written one sentence. It never left the house, but my hand shook as I read it, because I knew that wasn't true. It had left, and it was in my house now. That night, I sat my wife down. I tried to explain. Not everything, just enough. "There's something wrong with that house," I said. "Something that follows people home." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You need sleep. That's what's wrong. You're letting cases get into your head again." I wanted to argue, but then I heard the scrape again. This time, not from the bedroom, not from the walls, from the baby monitor on the counter. I rushed to it. The static was thick, jagged, but through it, I heard breathing, and then a voice. Low, wet, drawn out. "Don't let me take her." I sprinted to my daughter's room. She was sitting upright in bed, eyes wide, staring into the corner. I followed her gaze, and for the first time, I saw it fully. A shape darker than the dark itself. Limbs too long, bending in impossible angles. Its head tilted, as if curious, and its hand, thin, spidery fingers, was inches from her hair. I fired. 3 rounds. The bullets ripped through plaster, through shadow. The shape collapsed into itself, vanishing in a smear of darkness that evaporated into the floor. My daughter screamed. My wife ran in, saw the holes in the wall, smoke from my gun. She didn't see the thing. She only saw me. And that was the beginning of the end. The department put me on leave. Said I was unstable. My wife took our daughter to her parents' house. Said she couldn't trust me around a firearm. But none of that mattered, because I knew it wasn't gone. Every night, even alone in my empty house, I could feel it, watching, waiting, and the last entry I found in Alvarez's notes wouldn't stop playing in my head. The more you see it, the closer it gets. And I had seen it. I had looked right into its face, which meant I wasn't protecting anyone anymore. I was next. The first night alone in that house was the longest of my life. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the siding carried weight. But it wasn't just noise. It was intent, like the house itself was exhaling around me, waiting for me to break. I set up camp in the living room, my service pistol in reach, the lights blazing in every corner. I thought maybe if I drowned it out with brightness, with noise, it couldn't reach me. I was wrong, because the more I tried to deny it, the stronger it got. At 3:17 a.m., I heard the scrape. Not from the closet, not from the walls, from right behind me. I spun, pistol raised, but the room was empty. Just shadows stretching too far under the couch, pooling too dark in the corners. And then a whisper just above a breath. Michael. I fired. Once. Twice. Drywall dust exploded. Chunks of plaster rained down. My ears rang from the gunshots. But the voice didn't stop. It laughed. Not loud. Not human. More like the sound of water bubbling up through rotted wood. I collapsed into the couch, guns shaking in my hands, my chest heaving like I'd run 10 miles. And then I saw it. On the wall, just above where the bullets hit. The plaster had cracked into shapes. Letters. Always watching. The next morning, I drove to the precinct, desperate for someone to ground me. But the looks I got, they weren't sympathy. They were suspicion. The chief called me into his office. Shut the door. Listen, he said, leaning forward. We've all seen what cases can do to a man. But your wife's filed statements. Your neighbors reported gunfire. Alvarez is missing. Now you're sitting here with dark circles, like you haven't slept in a month. I tried to speak, to explain, but my throat closed up. Because how do you say out loud? How do you tell another cop that you're being hunted by something you can't cuff, can't shoot, can't even prove exists? I managed only one sentence. It's not human. He stared at me. No nod, no laugh, no denial. Just a long silence. Then he said, "Turn in your badge and weapon. Take some time off." That was it. Years on the job. Gone in a minute. But deep down, I knew they couldn't protect me anyway. That night, I checked into a cheap roadside motel off the interstate. Thought maybe if I left the house behind, I'd leave it behind too. But the second I shut the door, I knew I'd been followed. The mirror in the bathroom was already fogged, though I hadn't run the shower, and scrawled across the glass, dripping like ink, "She's not safe." I smashed the mirror with my fist. Shards clattered into the sink. Blood trickled from my knuckles. I didn't even feel it. All I felt was rage. "You want me?" I screamed at the empty room. "Then take me. Leave her alone." Silence. And then, from under the bed, a low scrape. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. By dawn, my hands were trembling too much to drive, but I forced myself to the hospital to see the boy again. Only, when I got there, his room was empty. The nurse at the desk looked up at me with pity. "He's gone." Flatlined at 2:11 a.m. The timing hit me like a bullet. 2:11. That was the exact moment I was in the motel bathroom, screaming at shadows. I staggered out, while rising in my throat, because now I knew, whatever this thing was, it wasn't bound to one host. It wasn't limited to Alder Street. It was moving, growing, and somehow through me it was feeding. The next 48 hours blurred into madness. Every surface, every reflective thing became a conduit. Bathroom tiles, car windows, even the surface of my coffee. Always the same message. Always escalating. "She's next. You can't hide. You're ours. I started tearing mirrors off walls, smashing glass with my fists. My hands were shredded, but it didn't matter, because every time I blinked, I saw it anyway. The thing. Sometimes in the corner, sometimes right behind me. Sometimes, God help me, inside the faces of strangers on the street. Their eyes would flick black for a second. Their mouths would twitch into grotesque smiles. And I'd know. It was everywhere. By the third night, I couldn't fight anymore. My body gave out. I passed out on the motel bed, still wearing my clothes, still clutching my pistol. And that's when the dream came. Except it wasn't a dream. It was a place. A long hallway, endless and dark, lined with doors that stretched on forever. Each door had a number. Each door rattled, as though something inside was desperate to get out. I walked, for what felt like hours. My footsteps echoed, but I wasn't alone. Behind me, that wet, dragging sound. Scrape, scrape, scrape. I turned, and there it was. The thing. Not just a shadow now. Its face was almost visible. A blur of features stretched too far, eyes sunk too deep, mouth torn too wide. It reached for me, and in its hand, it clutched a badge. My badge. It raised the badge to its face like a mask and whispered through the mangled teeth. We're the same now. I woke up screaming, soaked in sweat, pistol still in my hand. On the motel wall, carved deep into the paint, were 3 words. Welcome home. I checked out that morning. Left cash on the counter, no ID, no trace. I didn't even bother to pack, because I knew it didn't matter where I went. It would find me. It already had. But the final blow came when I tried to call my wife. Just to hear her voice. Just to hear my daughter in the background. The phone rang once. Twice. Then someone picked up. But it wasn't her. It wasn't anyone human. It was the same voice I'd heard through the baby monitor. The same voice from under the bed. Slow, wet, drawn out. She's already ours. And then the line went dead. I threw the phone across the room, dropped to my knees, and sobbed. Me, a cop who'd stared down murderers, cartel enforcers, killers without conscience. And here I was, broken, because this wasn't a case I could close. This was a verdict, and the sentence was already written. By the time the sun set, I knew what part 4 of the story really was. Not the fight, not the investigation, the collapse. Because no matter how hard I'd fought, no matter how many rounds I fired, how many mirrors I'd smashed, it wasn't just in my house. It wasn't just in Alder Street. It was in me now. I never thought I'd be the kind of man who broke under pressure. But that's exactly what I did. And the truth is, it wasn't sudden. It wasn't some single night where the lights went out and the monster came crashing through the door. No, it was a slow bleed. A drip, drip, drip of fear hollowing me out from the inside. By the time I realized how far gone I was, there was nothing left to salvage. That's why I'm telling you this. Because if I don't say it out loud, if I don't let someone else hear it, then it's just me and the silence. And in the silence it waits. After that phone call, the one where it spoke in my wife's voice, I stopped trying to reach her. What was I going to say? Hey honey, by the way, I'm cursed, haunted, whatever you want to call it. Don't worry though, it'll probably come for you too. No, I couldn't put that weight on her shoulders. Instead, I drove. Hours, days, states, eating gas station food, sleeping in the car. I thought if I outrun my life, I could outrun it. But every town I passed, every mirror in a dingy bathroom, every glance out the corner of my eye while fueling up, it followed. Always the same presence, the same scrape. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch my reflection moving a second too late, like it was rehearsing what came next. By the second week, I was hallucinating, or at least I thought I was. Once, in a diner at 2 a.m., I looked up and every person inside had stopped eating. Forks frozen halfway, coffee mugs pressed to lips, and they were all staring at me. Not blinking, not breathing, just staring. Then, in perfect unison, they whispered one word, confess. I bolted out of there so fast I left my wallet on the table. When I glanced back through the window, everyone was eating again. Normal, like nothing had happened. But I knew better. Confess. That word burrowed into me like a tick, and maybe that's when I realized the truth. This wasn't about catching a monster. It wasn't about solving a case. It was about me. It wanted me to confess, to lay bare the weight I'd been carrying since Alder Street, since the boy, since Alvarez. It wanted me to admit the thing I'd buried under years of badge and bravado, that I wasn't in control, that maybe I never had been. You want to know the real reason this case haunts me? It's not just the deaths. It's not just the voices, the notes, the endless nights staring into shadows that stared back. It's that I don't know how much of it was real, how much was truly happening, and how much was already inside me. Maybe Alder Street didn't curse me. Maybe it just revealed me. The last time I saw Alvarez, at least, the last time I saw him alive, he told me something I didn't understand until it was too late. He said, "They don't take you all at once. They hollow you out, piece by piece. And when there's nothing left but the fear, they move in." That's the part one can't shake. Because when I look back at my career, at the nights alone in patrol cars, at the morgue photos, at the mothers screaming in doorways after I knocked with bad news, maybe I was hollowing out long before Alder Street. Maybe that's why it found me so easily. The final straw came 3 nights ago. I was holed up in another motel. Different state, different wallpaper, same stench of mildew and despair. I woke at 3:17 a.m. The scrape again, the whisper again. But this time, I didn't see it in the corner. I saw it in the mirror. My reflection was smiling. I wasn't. Its lips peeled back too far, its teeth too sharp. And then, with my face, with my voice, it said the words, "We're here." I smashed the mirror, glass everywhere. My hands shredded, blood dripping onto the cheap carpet. But even through the shards, I could still see it smiling back at me. So here I am, talking into this recorder, pouring out the parts of me I never thought I'd share. Because if I don't, if I just keep carrying it in silence, I know what happens next. I've seen it. I'll be found like the others, wide-eyed, mouth frozen mid-scream, fingers clutching a note I didn't write, and the note will say the same thing they all said. Don't let them take me. But you and I both know it's already too late for that. So why confess? Because maybe if someone hears this, they'll understand. Not save me, not fix me. Just understand that once you've looked into the dark long enough, once you've heard your own name whispered by something that shouldn't have a mouth, once you've felt reality fray at the edges until you can't tell if you're awake or dreaming, you don't come back. You never come back. If you're still listening, take this as a warning. Don't chase shadows into houses that stink of rot and silence. Don't think your badge or your training will protect you, because the darkness doesn't care about jurisdiction. It only cares about one thing, hollowing you out, piece by piece, until you confess. And me, I've already confessed. So if you find me tomorrow, or next week, or next year, don't ask questions. Don't write reports. Don't try to rationalize it. Just know that I was telling the truth, and that when you close the file, when you shut off the lights, when you think you're safe in the silence of your own home, listen closely. Because if you hear the scrape, if you hear the whisper, it's already too late. That's why this is my most terrifying confession. Not because of what happened, but because it's still happening, right now, even as you listen. And if you're listening, then it's found you too.